Well, what I'm going to do is tonight, and I'll keep it crisp and see if there's any discussion near the end there, is I'll tell about other things around that space, but not so much on the battery itself. And at the end, if there's interest or time, I can give an update on how we're doing with respect to the business case, and that battery is working great. And also, we have a slide that talks about how we are using mass data from our AMI system. So we'll get there. So let me start off. I've been really happy to be part of Connexus. You see on the screen is some basics about the cooperative. It's a cooperative. We're owned by our members. It's the reason we wake up in the morning is to do things for our members. It's one of the largest co-ops in the US. There's about 860 odd co-ops like us. We're in the top 20. 138,000 meters, probably translate that to 300,000 plus people in terms of families. And it also includes our commercial meters, about 90% by count residential, 10% commercial. Touch 7 different counties. If 500 megawatts summer peak is a meaningful number to you, it's not large, but we're pretty significant. And interestingly, of our 9,000 miles of primary wire, only 3,000 is above ground. We are known for being quite innovative as utility, but we don't do innovation just because it's cool. We do it because there's a successful business model that we build around technologies, and only because they help benefit our members. So if you go to the next slide, this is a list of a lot of firsts. And I point at the staff at Connexus, who are just incredibly talented people. And in the renewable space, we had the very first, it's a baby today, the first community solar array was built outside our headquarters. And that array was the one where we decided to put plantings underneath of it. So it became the first one where there was prairie grasses integrated. And then a couple years later, we had all this interest in people wanting to own panels, but it didn't come forward. So we opened up this concept, still probably one of the, probably somewhat unique in the state, where consumers can express a green ethic by signing up for half house or whole house. So for a nominal charge per month, we will take the solar RECs and green all the energy that's provided to consumers that want that. And the thing that's unique about it, where once you put a panel on your house, which we encourage to, if people would like to do that, you can rotate in and out of the program at will. And for a cooperative that serves a more mobile constituency, where people are moving in and out and all that, it really allows people to do and express a green ethic, and we make it easy for them and inexpensive. Then along the way, that's where I met Rob. We did pollinator habitat, and we brought honey production, apiaries within the array. And then that became quite notable. No one else was doing it at the time. And then there was a lead from Rob. We sold honey. Rob, do you recall the beer maker that bought the honey for the first time?
Yeah, it was 56 Brewing on the northern edge of Minneapolis.
Yep. And then they asked us, they put honey in their beer, and they said, we'd like to green our beer. Will you sell us renewable energy credits? So it might be the first time, I don't know the US, but we gave them a certificate. It was at the rollout of the beer, and they knew how much electricity that they used, and we essentially greened the first beer. And then in 2018, the cost of solar is dropping. I'll show you that in a minute or two. That's when we built the solar array with the storage integrated in. And then just about a week ago, we did the grand opening on Sunflower 1 and 2. And I'll also talk a little bit there about what we have learned in terms of integrating solar into the distribution level grid. Storage is listed here in AMI. If we have time at the end, I'll comment on those. But the other thing that we're notable for is how we are putting control, this is under load management, into consumer hands on how they may want to manage their loads. And I'll mention, we've been doing something called behavioral demand response. So I don't know how many on this call have like a switched air conditioner where the utility, if it gets hot and they need the load off, they'll send a signal to your switch and it'll turn off your condenser outside. We got lots of feedback from consumers saying, we don't like that. In fact, I'm going to pull out of this program, which so we decided was, what can we do? What can we do differently? And so we have Wi-Fi thermostats that we can send a signal to, but the consumer can override. Maybe some on the call have this. Well, people loved it. And the other thing does, it almost doubles the amount of demand response or peak avoidance. So we did that early on. And today we still provide a lot of help for people that want to do Wi-Fi. But then we went one further. And when we had AMI, we had the availability of consumption data so we could figure out the baselines of what homes were using. And we said, all right, well, maybe you don't want a Wi-Fi, but you want to figure out yourself. So we send out a text or an email, whatever the consumer wants, that signs up for this program at no cost and at their option, and say, hey, tomorrow between 5 and 8, if you'll reduce your use, we'll pay you $1 per kilowatt hour. Well, for those that don't really pay attention to the details of their bill, that's about 7 times our retail rate. And why would we do that? Because when you reduce peak during the most expensive hours on the 3 months of the year, the summer months, we save a whole bunch of money and we can share that with the consumer. So a year ago, the family that saved the most in the 3-month period, where they only did it just a couple times a month at most, $162 saved off their bill at their option. So that's called peak time rebate. And it's another innovation where we put control into the consumer's hands in terms of conservation. And then I'll comment a little bit about electrification at the end. I have a slide on that. So next slide. So this is a picture of our service territory. If you didn't catch the first slide, it's on the north side of the Twin Cities, basically north of the river. The far west and the eastern edge is St. Cloud, all the way to the Marina St. Croix. And these are our solar projects. They're not large like you'd see Excel. Like we've all driven down 94 or somewhere, you see these big fields of solar. And that's fine. But when you have solar far away from where people use it, you need transmission to move it from where it's generated to where it's consumed. What we're doing is something different. Rather than being out on the bulk system, there's nothing wrong with that, in transmitting renewables at high voltage, which you need for wind, by the way. For solar in Connexus' service area, we do it at lower voltage and we integrate it into our grid so that all the energy that is generated by solar is used by our consumers. So I'll spend a few more words on that as we go along here. So next slide. So why would we do that? Well, this is a picture of our actual indicative costs. So on the far left, our wholesale power provider is Greg Ridderbusch Energy. And on average, delivered to the substation, you all seen them when you drive around, it's about $85 megawatt hour, okay? Think about 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour, if that helps kind of gauge it for you. So Connexus Energy on the right, all right, so on the left, that's where you move it with transmission lines, drop it off at a substation, and we deliver it to the consumer. On the right, this is in the indicative economics of our arrays that I've mentioned already tonight. That tiny little array back in 2014 was $90 megawatt hour, and that was not less than our cost of power. But then 3 years later, it was 70. In 2020, it was 55, and that was our most recent array that we put in place. We expect in a couple of years it'll get down to 45. So for Connexus consumers and our members who own us, when we generate power from solar in our service area, it saves $30 a megawatt hour, 3 cents a kilowatt hour, and that is very significant. So what are we getting? We're getting less expensive electricity so that we can succeed in doing what our members ask. And our members ask us the following. We've done studies and we have focus groups, and our members say, we want you to be green, but not all of us want to pay more for it. We actually don't want to pay any more for it. We want you to figure out a way how to do that. And if you would spin it back to 2014, that wasn't quite possible yet. But today it is. And I'll bet you everyone on the call already knows that, right? Wind you can get in the 20s today, but you have to move it to, to where you want to use it. And in solar, in the way we are doing it, which is distribution grid integrated, low voltage, no need for transmission, we're able to be about 35% less than what wholesale electricity is, and we're able to share all that benefits with our members. So the next slide. So let me try to bring it back up to 50,000 feet and what we're learning how to do. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with the bulk system, but here's what's special about what we're trying to achieve today. I use this term, made here, used here. It's kind of a lay way of saying it, but you generate it within our service area, right next to where members can see it and drive by, and we use it here. And what's important about that is, for solar arrays that are remote, the land rents are being provided over where it's generated, not here. The tax base, all these other things. Here, the generation's here, the prairie plantings under the array is here, the beekeepers are allowed to do it here, the benefits are here. So it is made here, used here. And we think it's one of the answers to this concept of social equity of renewable energy. So we focus so that all the benefits are here in the area that hosts the array. And then kind of related, stack benefits and uses. I do not think we can afford as a society anymore to build renewable energy and have that be the only thing that's on the land. So that's why when we met up with Rob and we got help from Fresh Energy, this idea of if you're going to put some land in the generation production for 25 years, you can at least upgrade the soil. You can do other things with it, like honey production. And so you stack the benefits and uses and not use a valuable piece of land, particularly when it's being integrated closer to where people live. We think that's a sensitive way of working with communities and integrating these kind of assets so everyone can get a benefit. And then the last thing, shared savings and scale economies. So our arrays, and I showed where they're located in 4 different places. The consumers that live near there get the kind of benefits I was talking about, right? So it's shared savings, but everyone in our membership is getting scale economies. So if you're a Connexus member, you can be assured that we're doing these kind of things. And then if you are living right near them, you are getting the value of that solar energy. You can in fact green your house. And in fact, near the array in Princeton is an industrial park, and industrial producers there are talking with us about buying the REC so they can green their production processes right local there. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing with respect to solar. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned on EVs, and then I'll ask before I open up for questions whether you guys would like to hear a little bit more about mass data, what we're doing there with AMI, an update, maybe a minute or two on that, and an update on our storage. So Connexus, like everyone, we are trying to be helpful to electric vehicle owners. Believe it or not, we think on our system today, we're not quite sure if there's a precise number, but we only have 362 EVs on our rates. Now, it's not a complaint because when our consumers want to have EVs, we want to be ready to help them. And our goal is to be the easiest electric utility to have an EV with. We do a number of different things. We had one of the earliest time of day rates because you want EVs, if you can, charging off peak. Otherwise, they can use infrastructure and actually be more costly. The other thing that we've done very recently, and unless you're a Connexus member, I'm not sure if we have any on the call. It'd be kind of fun to hear about that when I finish up here. But we are rolling out a rate that's a flat rate. It's so if you think, all right, if I had a gasoline vehicle, maybe I'm spending $100 a month in gasoline if I'm a commuter. We have a rate at our consumer's option, $26, charge as much as you want between 9 p.m. 9 a.m. And it's in pilot. We haven't decided to roll it out to our whole membership yet, and anyone that has an EV, but it's something that just makes it very simple. And we're going to see focus groups at the end to see how people like that rate. And we also are helping. One of the things, like you hire an electrician to get your house ready for level 2 charger. One of the things the electrician doesn't really know is does the house, is it sitting on a circuit that has enough capacity on it to serve, maybe there's a couple EVs in that locale, in that local region there, in a cul-de-sac or what have you. We actually send out our master electricians on staff, and we'll go to a consumer home if they ask. And we will look at the infrastructure that we have there, we'll look at the inside, and then we're going to help them get a level 2 charger installed in the home and get them on the rate that is most advantageous for them. So that's the kind of things. We don't think that electric utility should be in the business of trying to help sell EVs or things like that, but we should be in the business of making sure where the EVs are charged most often so far, which is at home, that we are a really easy and friendly place to do that. So let me conclude on kind of those remarks and go to the next slide, Rob. So would anyone like to hear about how our storage is going, an update from 2019? Let me just pause and just hear, does anyone want to hear about that? I'll give a minute or two.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So our storage project, we have 15 megawatts split between 2 locations. If you might recall, it was the only one brought into service, and the business case on it is take solar energy, fill up those batteries, and do it when production is high, and then time shift to when you want to discharge over high cost times. And so it's worked out, by the way, like it's worked out great. That business case is saving Connexus a couple $1 million a year right now, just on 2 solar fields. And we've had, as a new technology, it didn't work perfect right out. There was tuning. Hey, sometimes some of the batteries perform better than others. What's going on? So it's been a great learning experience. Our staff and our provider, which is NextEra out of Florida, have learned together so much about how storage works. And the business case and the savings that we presented to our board of directors that reflects the decisions of Connexus consumers. We are so happy it's worked out exactly like we had hoped. The batteries themselves, they have overperformed in terms that they've been actually produced a little more storage room than we had thought. We did have one event where we had one battery that had trouble up at one of our locations, and you're going to have that with brand new technologies. And next year, it diagnosed the issue and is going to be replacing that. So we had a lot of people look at it. A lot of legislators come and see it. It's always open, because one of the things that we believe is, if we're doing some of these things, it's not just for us. We have the benefit of being able to do this with our business model, and we're always open to share with others. So that's a little bit of the update on the storage. Let me flip to the last slide. So we did AMI, the metering infrastructure. Not sure if you want to hear how that's working out. Anyone? Otherwise, we'll just open up for general Q&A.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we were, as a utility, kind of unbelievable. I joined in 2015. We still had walking meter readers because the economics of walking meter readers were extremely good, and our meter readers were excellent at what they do. But we got to the point that it was obvious that the new grid integration of things like I've been talking about, The kind of programs I mentioned, like peak time rebate, you can't do that the way we used to do things. And so we replaced those, and we put in a Honeywell system. We wanted to use a Minnesota company, so we did. And when we implemented the project, we thought in advance, this is not just about reading meters and sending bills. This is about how can we take that investment that we've been able to make on behalf of the consumer and get more out of it. So we thought through the data side way early. And we can do things today that the peak time metering, or I'm sorry, peak time rebate is based on this data. We keep the data private. We have never released any data, consumer data at all. It's our promise to our members. And then we do other things with it. So here's an example. We wanted to see where do we have areas in our grid where we're having more outages than others. So we use spatial tech, GIS with our AMI data, and diagnosed an area where our grid was having needed some reinforcement. And we only were able to do that because we had the visualization that was afforded us by the mass data and a GIS application together. So we were able to do things. Our consumers can look at their data from yesterday. They can go in the morning, hit the button, go onto our site. They can see a presentation of their own personal use. And then what they can do is any of our rate options, they can say, what if I'm on this option today and I want to try this other option? I want to go time of use for my EV, but I'm not doing it now. And you can do what ifs with our meter data, your data, our consumers' data on our website. So we are just in the early stages of exploring these kinds of things. And it was because when we implemented this, we took the philosophy of this is a significant process and technology change. How do we build a model around it? How do we build innovation around it? With the end being, it's just not about billing for our services. It's about doing everything we can to benefit our members. So let me stop there. I want to tell you how much I appreciated being able to present. I know Rob's still going to make his presentation, but I'm going to stop and see what discussion and Q&A. I think I saw a thing that blipped up while I was going. It said, what's our basic service charge? And I think it's $10.50 today still.
Greg, one of the issues that we hear about related to the co-ops and stuff, all 28, is in the connection with GRE with the power plant up in North Dakota. What has Connexus taken a position on that?
Let me say what I can. So the issue is around Coal Creek Station. In May of 2020, Greg Ridderbusch Energy announced that they were going to shut down Coal Creek Station, or if the benefits were stronger by selling it to someone else, they would sell it to someone else. And at that time, we looked at the benefits for Connexus consumers, and they were substantial. And so our board members, because we are the largest owner, we own about 20%, and the other 27 own the rest. And we looked at it and said, okay, this is going to benefit our members. It's going to eliminate the carbon coming off of it. So we support it. I think it sounds like you're very tuned in. What's recently been announced by Great River is the intention to sell it. They don't have everything worked out yet. And with some of the confidentiality that's being enforced around the deal, I can't say too much about any of the financial details, but there is an initiative to sell it. When we look at it today, the benefits don't look nearly as good as they were before. So just by that one thing alone, and I'll set carbon aside for a minute, we are not as excited about this deal anymore. But we've yet to express our vote as a system, which is going to occur here in a little bit. The other thing that is a concern, and I'm not sure if others on this call share it, is you know, the power plant's going to continue to operate before it wasn't. And it's a power plant that puts about 9 million tons of CO2 a year into the air. And our members have asked us, green our grid and don't make it cost anymore. And that's the path that we're on. And so while the details are not yet final on whether the plant might sell, those two concerns would drive our vote on whether this thing should happen. But we did support the shutdown, and that's maybe what I can say right now.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions before Rob starts?
There's a
Can
couple
I ask a question?
in the chat.
Greg, there's, with the electric car chargers,
Yes.
you've heard of this vehicle to grid, where the grid can, or, the homeowner can charge their, bring energy storage out of their electric cars, but also grids. I know this was talked about some years ago, using electric cars and car chargers to help stabilize the grid. Is that something that you've looked at? I know that people talked about it, I just never heard two specifics.
We are, I'll tell you where it is, I believe. And if there's anyone on the call that has even more current on this, please say it. So it's one of those things that has been a opportunity that people have talked about for years now. And I'm going to tell you, Connexus is interested in it. But one of the things that still holds it back today is the warranties that come with these new vehicles. Are invalidated if you use them in that way. And so it is technically possible to do it, but there's still just some work that needs to be done to create standards. And because the industry is still so new, I mean, I think the vehicle makers are simply trying to get the vehicles out there at a scale where they can be successful financially with electrification of transportation fleet. So we want to see how that might work, and but it's not something that we could even try today, because there's no way we'd ask a consumer to invalidate a warranty, and so that's what's constraining it a little bit. So I think it's a cool idea, and I think it's some of the same thing. If we can have 15 megawatts of batteries that would offset the most expensive power of the year, how cool would it be for us to be able to tap into only if the consumers say it's okay? So there'd have to be some telemetry that would go back and forth, but how cool would that be? And then we would pay the consumer for that valuable electricity that was provided during that time. So I love the idea. It's just not technically or business feasible yet, but we're continuing to monitor.
And then Greg, there's a question in the chat. Do you, more of a language question, do you refer to beneficial electrification when talking about your program?
We use that term, but it's a little wonky, and most consumers who we live to serve don't sit around thinking about beneficial electrification. So we think about what's best for the consumer, what saves them money, what do they want? Do they want to express a green ethic? So we provide those kinds of options. But when we're back at our offices and this utility people talking with each other, yeah, absolutely. The terms of beneficial electrification, and by the way, one more point on this. Beneficial has a really important meaning, which means you don't electrify stuff just to electrify it so you can sell more electricity. That's not the right thing to do for the consumer. But if the use of new technologies create broad benefits so that the consumer's benefiting, society's benefiting, the perfect example are EVs, by the way, then that's a great example of beneficial electrification. So
and Greg, I'll just encourage everyone on this call to go to the what is it? Visit Blaine. They've got a fantastic golf course there next to the National Sports Center. And that golf course recently changed over from all kind of, two-stroke gas motor golf carts to a fully electric golf cart fleet. The head of that program said that when they advised their members, they got a lot of griping and feedback and thought, oh God, we're going to have golf carts like running out of battery on the 12th hole. And all of these kinds of things. Well, I'll tell you what, their members, the golfers absolutely love the new carts because they get to plug in and charge all of their gizmos. They got to, they got this big touch screen that tells them all about the link that they're on, as well as the next hole. And there's like options to order more refreshments. So, so there's just fantastic beneficial electrification and new services that come from updating this modern technology.
It's so cool. So any other questions? I don't want to rob of his time.
I just have one statement. I've been reading Aldo Leopold's A Sand County Almanac this week, and I think it might be worth resisting planting crops where the photovoltaic displays are, and instead doing things to enhance the environment and serve different species, because we probably all read about the huge proportion of bird species, whole species, that have disappeared just recently. They don't exist anymore. And so making money on land isn't the only important thing, because we need all of us on the planet, all the species, to work together. So, planting for pollinators, but also planting over time a series of things that attract different wildlife, insects, snakes, you name it, and the larger ones. That's worthwhile too.
Thank you for saying that. And we're always open. And one of the things that we've been excited about Rob joining our staff is he has so much expertise and perspective on those kinds of things. And I just hope that any of us on this call tonight, we drive by new solar arrays and facilities going in, that we never see gravel ever being used again. And that we see the use of that land, because I hear you on the diversity of the bird species and the pollinators and all those things. We need to be paying attention to that also. And we can be doing double and triple dipping the value from land. And the other thing that's out there is we are trying to find, one last point, we're trying to find land that doesn't have an economic use. And I'll give you an example. There are closed landfills out there where the skirt land around it is part of it, not the landfill itself. And we are in the process of trying to pilot the very first example of a project. Instead of using a field, put the land around a closed landfill as an example, and to put solar there, and make use of land that has no other really economic value. It's not good for crops or anything else. So I think land use and integration of these kinds of projects closer and in a sensitive way, closer to people, I think is one part of the solution we need to green the grid. So with that, let me stop. I want to thank the group for giving us an opportunity here again to share kind of what we're doing. We very much appreciate that. Always willing to do it. And I'm going to turn it over to Rob. So thanks so much for the opportunity this evening.
Thank you, Greg. And this is really fantastic. It has been just an absolute delight to join the team and all the members at Connexus Energy. I'm on my, I believe, 6th or 7th day on the job. And it is fantastic. It was really neat meeting Greg and members of his team back in 2015, when I had an opportunity to visit the very first pollinator-friendly solar project in the whole state of Minnesota, and the whole nation, actually. Since then, I've been working as well, both at Fresh Energy, where I was, and now at Connexus, where I am, as the chair of a committee that advises research projects from coast to coast, from the North Coast to the South Coast as well, that looks at stacking benefits and stacking uses into photovoltaic solar projects. And so this is a project called Inspire, run by the National Renewable Energy Lab. They're one of the U.S. Department of Energy's national energy labs all across the country, and they happen to be based in the Boulder area. But these projects include partners like Cliff Bar and Disney, and President Jimmy Carter's solar array down in Plains, Georgia, and we're looking at not just pollinator habitat, but how crops grown in the shade or other areas of the solar project can benefit from those specific conditions, and also how the PV solar can benefit from those land uses, either from the additional transpiration of water or the low cost landscape management. And so this is a photo that I took when I first visited Connexus back in 2015 on the left. And then in the right is one of the projects that inspired this work, which was built a few years before in the United Kingdom. And so pollinator-friendly solar has really taken off, and it's not just about stacked benefits and dual uses. It also brings us an additional amount of just pure joy. It just gives you a great sense of satisfaction to know that we have solutions that can scale, that can help us address in a meaningful way the climate crisis, as well as the biodiversity crisis, as well as economic unrest, as well as providing more economic development for our local communities. So this is an engineer's slide, but the takeaway is really very simple. Just the bold text that the pollinator habitat on solar farms results in an increase in beneficial insects. That's ladybugs, that's pollinators, that's a variety of other insects as well. That these insects, the abundance increases over time. The energy production from the solar array itself benefits from the cooler microclimate grown under and around the panels, and that the operating costs, the O&M costs of the solar project reduce over time because of fewer mowing events. So these are really interesting opportunities, because there's no reason that, I know that an engineer can come into these things and think, oh, I know how to do this, and just put down class 5 gravel or put down turf grass. But an additional amount of training on an ecosystem and an innovative and resilient landscape is absolutely necessary and shows significant and beneficial returns. So it's obviously some of Minnesota's finest scientists that have advised this work. Dr. Karen Oberhauser, a monarch scientist who was at the University of Minnesota, recently moved to Wisconsin to take a job there leading the Arboretum. And of course, MacArthur Genius Award winner, Dr. Marla Spivak. And they've been extraordinary mentors to me and to the solar industry in embracing these practices. So the Board of Water and Soil Resources has a tool. We're an energy company. What do we know about pollinator habitat? Well, it's the policy tool provided by these entomologists that gives us a tool to be able to say, yeah, we meet these criteria, so we know we are doing something that is beneficial to pollinators. This is not a veneer. This is not a fringe. We're not putting lipstick on a pig. We're actually meaningfully changing the substantive product and the material of the system to provide a meaningful benefit. So this practice is being done nationwide, in a lot of different communities, particularly where there's areas of conflict related to farmland or our natural resources. So there's extraordinary opportunities. States like Michigan love this. They have so many pollinator dependent crops in Michigan, as well as in California. And so more and more states are finding ways to bring this practice to scale. And that's exactly what pollinator friendly solar is. It's a trade-off. It's an understanding. This is not a restoration of some pre-colonial condition. This is something meaningful and incremental that is providing a benefit. And it's better, certainly, and lower cost than turf grass or gravel. And so, Doug, for the folks that are taking the training, for the Minnesota State Fair, it's important to know that today, nationwide, crop yields for apples, blueberries, and a lot of delicious foods that we find at the State Fair even are actually being reduced by insufficient number of pollinators. We as humans have a responsibility, because if we don't keep the pollinators alive, then we have to go out there with little paintbrushes and dust the little flowers and then dust the little flowers. This becomes a very laborious job. So it's easy by comparison to simply keep habitat on the landscape and allow those pollinators to do all of the work that they do, billions and billions of visits between flowers each and every year. Obviously, it's not just the pollinators we care about, it's the management of the stormwater, it's the increased soil carbon and carbon sequestration. You see turf grass on the left, perfect maybe for the suburban landscape to get something to establish quickly. But for a solar array that's going to be on the landscape for 20 to 30 or more years, we need to lay down roots, particularly as a community-focused organization. So New York Times and Science Magazine have highlighted these meaningful benefits of embracing these practices. And it's not just, again, pollinators or soil carbon, but I had the opportunity to lead a tour with the executive team from Pheasants Forever last summer around some solar projects. And so I want to share these remarks from the CEO of Pheasants Forever with you all.
Hi, I'm Howard Vincent, President and CEO of Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, the habitat organization. Today we're out on a solar site looking at really quality wildlife habitat. And I think one of the big questions is, what is good habitat? And what you want on that landscape is you want that variety of forbs that are blooming in the spring. You want forbs blooming in the summer and the fall. You want it to be a resource for both pollinators and monarchs and all wildlife. And if the system's right, you're also going to be sequestering an incredible amount of carbon. You're going to be holding water and you're going to be protecting soil while generating energy. And this is really an exceptional site. That's what you're looking for on that landscape.
Great group of people and fantastic organization. There's obviously also lots of different uses for these projects. Through the NREL Inspire study, I've gotten to know the American Solar Grazing Association. Yes, this is a real thing. And they have a fantastic logo, as you can see here, that shows a sheep, in between grass and solar. And sheep and bees are not actually competitive. They're complementary, because the rotational grazing of sheep actually activates the soil and stimulates more biodiversity. So the sheep provide an exciting function that actually meaningfully improves the quality of the habitat and sequesters more carbon. It's not much in terms of the cost. It's really a rounding error. Solar developers, some of the largest in the world, have actually described this to me as budget dust in terms of the cost difference between turf grass and something meaningfully better. And then there's obviously a large number of projects all around the country. Minnesota Power here in the north, out in Vermont, here in Minnesota on a 100 megawatt project. This is a project over in Wisconsin showing the evolution of before, and then a couple years later, and then a couple years later. And so the developer of this project built also the one right behind me here, which is the Ramsey Renewable Station in Ramsey, Minnesota. And then, of course, this one is down in Texas. So this is a strategy that only is limited by the reality of where plants grow. So it only works where plants grow. But we can certainly do better than bare ground or turf grass. This is out in Oregon, here at Connexus in Minnesota. And then obviously, stacking functions and benefits by partnering with beekeepers like Bear Honey and Old Soul Apiaries out in Oregon. Here's Greg back in 2016, I believe, Greg. And we were way ahead of the game. And since then, a number of utilities around the country, including Excel right here in Minnesota, SIMPA, and MCE Clean Energy in California, as well as NIPSCO in Indiana, are following Connexus's lead, joining Connexus and saying, hey, we're going to ask for, proactively put it in our RFPs and ask for clean electrons, solar energy, paired with conservation landscapes. And it's not just the utilities, but also corporations like Cliff Bar, Bank of America, big grocery store chain out east called the Giant Company, Organic Valley, and then right here, hometown hero Aveda. They're all asking as well. We want the solar energy and we want to pair it with stewardship of the land. So this is just an overview of President Jimmy Carter's solar project down in Plains, Georgia. It's also gorgeous, not so visible from space. But this work also is meaningfully advancing by the Connexus, the research partnerships that Connexus is forging ahead with. That includes 3 different studies, one with Monarch Joint Venture, doing an observational count of the insects on the arrays, with the Inspire study, with Argonne National Lab, looking at the value of these ecosystem services, specifically to the neighboring farms and how the neighboring farms crops benefit from the insects on the solar array. And then the PV Smart study looking at the infiltration of stormwater on these projects. So we've gone very deep and very wonky on a lot of different topics. So I want to keep it light as well and bring it back to something that we can all relate to. Because as engineers, we probably maybe got our start with building things and, making a better world by playing with Lego. And this kit doesn't exist yet in the real world, but you can vote for it at legosolarfarm.me. And if it gets 10,000 votes, Lego will consider turning it into a real kit available in stores worldwide. So we're grateful for your time and the conversation. And Doug, thank you again for inviting Greg and I to the conversation today.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Don't want to let these guys off, too easy. Lots of good stuff there.
I'd like to ask a quick question on you mentioned about on maybe like this weekend when it gets really warm. It's like $1 a watt. Can you explain that program a little bit more?
This is Craig. Are you speaking about the peak time rebate program that I mentioned?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Are you a Connexus member?
I am not, unfortunately, but
Well, you can move. No, just kidding. So
I used to be.
Oh, you used to be. Okay. So here's the way it works: is that the data comes in from the metering system, and it simply gets stored for metering purposes itself. But we offer consumers, they can come, they can sign up to be a peak time rebate in a program, which gives them the option. And what we do is we send them, and that there's only 3 months a year where the prices are high enough that we want to bother a consumer to do these things.
Okay.
So during those 3 months, June, July, August, when peaks are going to get ready to occur, we know about a day in advance. So we send a note to the consumer a day in advance. So pretend you're at home, send me an email, send me a text, whichever way they want. And then we say target hours 5 to 8. For every kilowatt hour that you reduce during those target hours, we will pay you $1. And so the event comes, and if you don't do anything, that's fine. It is completely opt-in, and there's no penalty. So then within 24 hours after the event, so the very next day, you actually will get an email with immediate feedback. Hey, yesterday, between those hours, you reduced your consumption by, 4 kilowatt hours. You get $4 for that event. And it might happen a couple times during the month. The peak only counts once on our side in terms of what we're paying for electricity, but we might do it a couple times just to make sure we don't miss it. So that's how the consumers are doing it. And then ones that have been most successful, they kind of make it fun, So the story I heard is, hey, everyone's coming home. We're gonna cook outside today in the barbecue. Hey, kids, turn off all your TVs. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna be outside. We're gonna be a family. We're gonna cook. And there's examples where people at the neighbors are doing that together. So they actually make it kind of fun. But the wonky term for it is behavioral demand response. And putting the power into the hands of the residential homeowner. We don't do it yet for commercial, but we've been asked.
Is that based on like their what they normally use during that time?
It is. So we know in the recent past, say the past 5 days, and we run an algorithm, what was the average use, and we know the temperatures. So we're able to temperature correct. And so we know basically what it is, and we don't make the consumer have to do anything like this. And then the actual use is compared against the recent base, and the difference between the two, if there is one and they chose to do it, is the amount that was saved.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question about pollinators.
Go ahead.
When you establish a pollinator of prairie, you're supposed to mow it about 4 times the first year that it's after it's seeded. So how does this work with the solar panels? I mean, do you end up running into the solar panels, or what size equipment do you use and so forth?
Yeah, so the neat thing with pollinator friendly solar is it's simply for the Connexus Energy and the utility, and even the solar developer that oftentimes owns the project. We offtake the power, or we buy the electricity from the project, is that they just hire a different set of subcontractors. So instead of hiring, Joe Mower that just mows every 6 weeks, they hire Prairie Restorations, or they hire Minnesota Native Landscapes, or they hire one of Minnesota's many companies that know exactly how to manage these high performance, resilient landscapes. In the case of solar, we need to quickly have the site established, have the vegetation established to stabilize the soil and close out the stormwater permit so that we don't have a lot of erosion and runoff. But then usually, you're right, in the first year, there's usually 2 or 3, sometimes 4, but not regularly, 2 or 3 mowing events. And that's to knock back the fast growing invasive species. And they're using tractors with mowers on the back. And then also, some weed whippers to get under and around the array. So, but they do have specialized mowers that have an arm, a swing arm, that swings out under the panels and then swings back at the posts. So that's how that happens. Usually the mower is set at around 8 or 9 inches. And then there's a couple other questions in the chat. Yeah, there's the exciting research that was published in Science magazine just this past summer showed that a pollinator-friendly solar array in Oregon had more than 26 different pollinators on it, over 12 visits from one summer. And what was really exciting was that only 12% of those pollinators that they found on the whole project happened to be honeybees. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's 20 honeybee hives just outside the fence. And so that means that solar arrays are a safe space to place a honeybee hive where they won't get directly sprayed with insecticides, but that mostly the honeybees are traveling 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 miles for other floral resources, and they're not competing with the native bees and the butterflies. So really beneficial dual use and opportunity to co-locate agriculture as well as benefit the nature.
Greg, a question I've got is, I mean, you guys are running, to me, some amazing programs. What about the other co-ops in Minnesota? Are they similar? Or, for example, like another big one close to you is Dakota Electric. Are their programs similar to yours, or?
So I can comment a bit and Rob add too, if I miss anything. So Dakota Electric also has been doing some solar integration. They have a couple of megawatts, not quite the same scale that we have, but when they put them in, I believe that they've been doing pollinator plantings under them, and they've been assisted by Greg Ridderbusch Energy in that. There are other co-ops around that are doing them also, and each of the member systems at Great River, most all of them have a test PV system at their headquarters so that they can learn how that operates. We just happen to be blessed at Connexus having enough size to be able to do these things a little more quickly and with a little more robust programs. But what happens in co-op world is we share with each other. And so as people are watching how these things go, we are always willing to help others. And we get questions from time to time. And now that we have Rob around also as a resource, I'm sure we'll get questions for his expertise. Rob, anything to add?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, Dakota has also done pollinator friendly solar with one of the same developers, NG Distributed Solar, that Connexus has worked with. And I see one of the questions in the chat about maintenance and management of these landscapes. And it's interesting to think about solar as similar but different than what's called CRP, or Conservation Reserve Program land. So a typical farmer might put some of his or her land in CRP and create pollinator habitat. Now, that can grow as tall as they want it. Within a solar array, you have to keep it below that lower edge of the panels. And then also within solar, you have actually resources, you have money to manage that habitat. With CRP, you usually get some seed mix for free, but there's usually not resources provided to manage the habitat. So solar is a great place to get an expert eye and to deploy habitat that's going to be well maintained to provide value and provide value without interfering with or obstructing with the generation of solar energy.
Rob, I'm going to pick up another question I see on chat, which is how far on average are your 10 megawatt arrays from the nearest substations? Actually, just a couple miles at most. When we do these designs and search for a site, we look for proximity to our infrastructure, because we don't want to, we want to manage the investment. We look for ideal locations like we've been describing, and we look for electrical integration, the design of production next to load, to make sure that on the sunniest day of the year, when consumers are using the least, think about a fall day or something like that, that all the energy can get absorbed there within that region, and it gets distributed by the sub. So whoever asked that question, that was you have a good idea how the stuff works. So the solar array comes in on a line into the substation. Essentially, the energy is distributed in that substation on the bus bars, and it goes out through the rest of the circuits coming off of the sub. And it just depends on the area. But the short answer is just a couple of miles at the most.
Doug, we're so grateful for the time and the engagement with your group and all of you on the line here, and very much look forward to seeing you all at the fair this year. It'll be great to be back.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you again. Any final questions? We got a couple minutes to go yet.
Thank you. This was a great presentation.
Yeah. Yep. Hi, Rob. Nice to see you. And we'll be sporting your your pollinator panel at the fair that you helped us with last year.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. You know, we got some feedback from the fair, the state fair itself, that when we put together an educational display about how pollinators are necessary for your favorite State Fair foods. I mean, you know, all of the butter and chocolate you want for Sweet Martha's cookies, you know, dairy depends on pollinators because cows eat alfalfa, and chocolate depends on this really interesting tiny little pollinator called a midgefly. But, you know, it's not just apples and blueberries. So many delicious things depend on pollinators.
So Rob, this is Greg. I think I'm going to have to join you at the fair. So I'm just going to pick up one last question that came up. So how much land is it used from 40K to 1 megawatt? So here's a rule of thumb for everyone on the call. It does vary, but it's about 5 acres per megawatt of solar capacity up here in the upper Midwest in our area. Okay, with that, I'm gonna run and maybe catch some dinner. So so thanks everyone. Really appreciated being part of this tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.